Hello, and welcome to the Sacred Heart Shaman podcast, where we talk about spiritual healing, shamanic wisdom, and the challenges of walking the healer's path. My name is Nadia Harenku, and today's episode number 50, Why You Struggle to Trust Your Intuition and How to Rebuild It. Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today. We are talking about intuition. And the topic for this podcast came out of one of my recent online offerings. I offer free donation-based classes every couple months on Meetup, and I had one on soul retrieval. Now, soul retrieval, I've talked about it before. It's my favorite thing. All of us need it. I've now actually begun offering it for free in my course library, just as a foundational offering. But I do it live on Meetup every once in a while. And a lot of people in the group were having the same concern. And that was, I feel like I'm making it up. I can't trust myself. And maybe they struggle with their intuition in general. And so this is a really important topic we need to talk about. Why we struggle with intuition, why it is such a problem, and how to fix it. And so going with your gut, trusting your intuition is everything. It is who you are, how you walk in the world. Self-trust, self-esteem are core parts of the intuition picture, especially for people who are walking a spiritual path, but also those who've been through trauma and are trying to heal from said trauma. Now, intuition, as I talk about it, applies to both men and women, though we talk about it much more when it comes to women. Men also have this ability. It has largely just been trained out of them. Now, trusting yourself, trusting your intuition feels simple in theory, but in reality, it is a very complicated healing process. When you have trouble trusting yourself, it's not just as simple as having a switch that you can flip, but for some reason we talk about it like it is. So I'm going to unpack that quite a bit today, and I'll invite you to stay tuned until the end because I will be giving you practices and homework that will start to shift things for you almost immediately. So first, we're going to talk about the collective wound of doubt. We all have a connection to the collective. It is part of being human, and it's especially part of being spiritual. And there are literal centuries of gaslighting spiritual wisdom, shutting down the voices of magical people, medicine people, literally violating them, making it illegal to practice, discounting collective, like embodied knowing, indigenous knowing and practices. It's a huge collective wound that is still very much present in our society. With all the persecution of witches, shamans, midwives, healers, indigenous medicine people, literally whole cultures told that they were wrong or dangerous that had been converted to Christianity. It doesn't take much to look back and see where this has been shut down. Now, this energy of persecution, of being shut out, still exists like a pool we unconsciously swim in. So I've talked about this a little bit before. We have collective pools of energy that we all share. Some of us are more connected to the collective than others. It is part of the spiritual path. When you're on a shamanic path, it is definitely part of your spiritual path. And it can be hard to distinguish self and collective at a certain part of your healing journey. Collective energy pools often feel a lot heavier, a lot bigger. They take us down really easily. So you have to be aware of what's happening when we touch into them. Now, there is like collective pools of doubt, of fear of being crazy, fear of standing out, fear of being killed or attacked or harmed in some way for expressing our truth. All of this is tied to collective wounds. And so the collective wounds plant seeds of distrust before you're even born when it comes to your intuition. Now, as spiritual beings, we're very connected to this collective wound because we're here to clean it up. Welcome. It's part of your job. And we feel this wound more strongly than other people, but it is present for everybody on some level. Now, let's talk about the family lineage piece of this wound. So we have the collective piece, which is all of humanity, and then we have the lineage piece. And, I'll invite you to think about where your ancestors come from and where they may have experienced persecution or had seeds of self-doubt planted. So, for example, in mine, we have the Ukrainian bloodline, and I don't know about Ukraine specifically because it's still a very mysterious country, like big picture. But for example, Russia had banned even the use of drums until 20 or 30 years ago, like shaman drums, hoop drums. I've heard stories of my grandmother who used to hold church services in her basement that very few people knew about. Now, Ukraine was very religious, so the need for her to hold services in her basement is very interesting to me. There is a general like snuffing out of older religions. As far as I can tell, I cannot find any information about older religions there outside of Christianity. And so history has been erased. And women were taught to be in the home. But there was I could tell there was a permeating knowledge about plant spirits and stuff like that from my grandmother. Unfortunately, she died when I was very young. On the other half of my family, we have Irish, Scottish, French, and Baltic. And that medicine is still very much alive in the bloodline. It was not as hidden, but there is a lot of fear of speaking out, even talking about energy healing. That bloodline carries some Puritan energy as well as like indigenous medicine woman from the UK kind of energy. And so even just thinking about like colonization, the act of moving to the United States and starting over and all the trauma, the witch trials, my family's from New England, I can see through my bloodline what's going on, what has gone on. And so you can do the same with your bloodline and tracing it back. The interesting thing too is if you still have grandparents alive, seeing how they behave or recalling how they behaved when you were a child. Like I have one grandmother who's still living. I think she's like 95 or something. And she keeps trying to tell doctors about these allergies that she can't prove. But she's like, I know that they're true. I know that they're here. I can feel them and nobody's listening to me. And it's kind of like an echo of, this is my intuition. This is what it's telling me. Why is everybody shutting me down? It's so brutal to watch. So think about the men and women that came before you in your bloodline. Like, was there religious control? Was there colonization? What were the abuse cycles? Was there a denial of intuition as silly or dangerous? Were the men in your family told they were not allowed to have feelings? Were they in the military? Were they simply providers? Were they emotionally available? And looking back as far as you can, or is even as far as you can remember, is helpful. When you look at your family patterns, like your immediate family, were your caregivers intuitive? Were they open about it, or were they afraid to act on it or afraid to talk to about it? Were they connected to their own bodies or wisdom? And I think this is a pretty easy one. Like when you think about your grandparents or your caregivers, whoever it was that raised you, did they come from a space of wisdom or did they come from a space of I say this lightly, brainwashing? Like, did they just repeat the things that they were told, or did they have a connection to truth, to their true selves? Now, as you get older, it'll be easier to identify this in the people that raised you. I think sometimes our trauma colors our memories with regard to our caregivers. But, think back and remember what you can about it. So we'll talk about epigenetics for a quick second. I am not a science person, as I've said many times. But there is this kind of studied phenomenon that trauma and fear literally passes down through your generations and shapes how your nervous system reacts when your intuition sparks. And I think that, or when, other certain things are happening, that there is this generational piece, this epigenetic piece that says, you're not safe, shut it down, or this is an illness that you have, or This is something that happened to you, even though it happened to your mother. Now, I'm going to say I believe in this to an extent, but in my opinion, as a shaman, epigenetics is less significant than we think. If we think it's significant, it will be significant, but spirit can override much of it. And our childhood really shapes a lot. So even if your family has a tremendous amount of trauma, you can come into your bloodline as an incredibly light being, an advanced being, and not have to play by any of the trauma that's been passed down to you. It is possible. And it's possible for you to spontaneously heal, or to have changes in your body or DNA as you are embodied human. Nothing is impossible. So epigenetics for sure plays a role, but don't give it as much weight as you're told to. That's all I'm going to say. In terms of personal wounds that affect your ability to have solid intuition, look at if your inner knowing as a child was validated or dismissed. Now, this is probably the most common reason why we have poor intuition skills. At least this is the reason we're most taught why we have poor intuition. And we get caught up here. Now, really, this is only a small part of it. But examples of this would be like being told you were too sensitive, you were punished or shamed when you spoke truth, when you wanted to express yourself, when you wanted to do something that other people thought it was stupid or not right. Maybe you were manipulated or gaslit by your parents, your teachers, your friends, maybe even society a little bit. Or maybe your boundaries were violated, teaching you that no is unsafe or meaningless. So this is another part that's kind of like adjacent to intuition. We think about having an intuition block, as in, a lot of people do, as in like, yeah, I wanted to express myself when I was 5 and my mom told me it was stupid and so I shut it down. And that's kind of a very straightforward way to look at it. There are lots of backdoor ways to look at it, and one would be boundary violation. So if you as a child were violated energetically, emotionally, or physically, you've had a boundary violation, and it makes it hard to discern what's yours and what's not. And you will likely have boundary issues until that original thing gets resolved, until you've learned the original lesson. And when you can't have your own firm boundaries, you can't have your own firm intuition, because intuition comes from within and it requires a container to sit in. So if your container is cracked or open or undefined, your intuition is not going to be anchored inside you, because you're always going to be influenced by the outside. I know that's kind of a deep concept, but it's very important to this whole conversation. Now, these childhood experiences that I just described, this is the multidimensional part of this conversation. Those childhood experiences prime us to gaslight ourselves. So as children, we're so empathetic, we're so open, we are little sponges, we don't even have super clear boundaries yet because everything is connected to us and our little hearts. And we take everything as if it's our own. So forget if your mom didn't tell you you were too sensitive. Maybe she told herself she was too sensitive. You have now taken that on for yourself, and you're going to walk through life thinking you're too sensitive. Don't listen to your intuition. It's wrong. You're just overly sensitive. This is huge, because when we take that as our own, we literally can't even heal it because it wasn't ours to begin with. And it's a huge part of the intuition puzzle. And the gaslighting. Let's go back to the gaslighting. When we don't trust our own intuition, we attract environments where others don't trust it either. Friends, partners, workplaces. And this creates a feedback loop. External dismissal confirms our internal doubt. Okay, so I'm going to say that in a different way. let's say that I don't think that I'm a healer. Right. I have doubt around this, even though I have strong intuition that I am a healer. I'm supposed to be doing healer work. I have a husband, a partner, a wife, who also has this self-doubt because I have this self-doubt. And that's what partnerships do. They reflect your stuff back to you. So I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to try to do some healing work. And then things are going to go in a way that I don't want them to go, or I don't think they're supposed to go. And I'm like, oh God, I knew I shouldn't be doing this work. Partner over here says, ooh, you probably shouldn't be doing this work. I think you're probably right. Like, you should just go back to the 9 to 5. You know what you're doing. You make the money, yada, yada, yada. And now, of course, they've reinforced your doubt around the healing work, even though your intuition is saying like, oh, you're a healer. You're a healer. Keep doing it. Now, imagine how much this happens in your life. If you are searching for other people to reflect back, whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, they're constantly reflecting back your doubt, and it feeds this, I can't listen to my intuition, it's not safe. Now, in addition to that, any kind of trauma that you've had overrides your inner signals as well. Your fight, flight, fawn response or patterns can even make your intuition feel like a threat instead of guidance. So we'll go back to childhood on this. What if you had some sort of violation emotionally, physically, or energetically? You tried to tell someone and they were like, no, you're making it up. We don't believe you. You brought it on yourself. Oh my God, it's my fault. I brought it on myself. Shame, shame, shame. Shut it down. You weren't violated. You weren't violated. Put it in a box, put it in your closet, put it away. So now you have this stuff in your shadow. It's layered with shame. It's interfering with your ability to listen to your intuition. That's a whole thing that needs to be unpacked, and a whole reason why a lot of people can't listen to their own intuition. Now, in addition to that, it's hard to build your intuition because intuition is subtle. It speaks in whispers, not in shouts. And any kind of trauma is going to train you to listen to chaos instead. It's going to train you to listen to threats and whatever's the loudest. So training yourself to listen to those subtle pieces is a big part of the spiritual path. It's a big part of what I teach. And it takes time. It's not a fireworks show. It's not obvious, especially when we have all this stuff going on that I just pointed out. Now, when your nervous system, okay, so let's talk about the parallel path of trauma here. When your nervous system is in chronic survival mode, which is like hypervigilance or shutdown, it makes it hard to distinguish fear from intuition. So unless you have done some trauma healing work around whatever the trauma is, and many of us have, don't get me wrong, and there's always more, it's going to interfere with the ability to listen to the intuition, and it's going to make it feel mixed and confusing and like, oh, I thought this was happening. This is what my intuition said, but then this is going on, and now I must not be able to trust my intuition because it was wrong. It's a crossing of signals, totally normal, but it does make it harder to rebuild. And intuition is not logical. It requires body-based awareness, which is often numbed or fragmented by trauma. Again, intuition is very tied to the spiritual, and the spiritual is not logical. It's not linear. Most of the time, it makes absolutely no sense. But that is one of the things that I've learned on my path that has been invaluable is the best things, the things that lead to the most awesome results. Guys, they rarely make sense. Like what was happening to me last year, and I was told to move, gotta leave, you gotta move, you gotta say goodbye, you gotta let go of all your clients, you gotta leave your house, gotta leave your kids. What? What do you mean? And I did, and it was because there was a whole bunch of stuff that I couldn't see. I wasn't ready to see. I needed healing, and I needed to get away from it first. So the more you follow the intuition, the more you learn, the louder it gets, the more you learn to have trust in it, and then the more awesome your life gets, because really that's like the goal all along. So let's talk about how to heal this and how to reclaim your self-trust. A big part of this is shadow work and parts work. And so you can notice when your intuition pops up and how you override it. And I hear this all the time from my clients. They're like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Like I knew. Okay, let's go back. You knew you shouldn't have done it and you did it anyway. So what happened in that moment that you did it anyway? What was the story in your body when you said, no, I'm not going to listen to my intuition? What part of you didn't feel safe listening to it? Or can you go meet the younger part of you who learned to disconnect from the intuition? That would be parts work. You can also do that in shamanic journey work. And I'm gonna include some practices at the end, so keep listening. Now I have a great example of one of my clients. Love her. She's amazing. She's just doing the work and she's had a hard go the last couple years. But she teaches me so much about the shadow work and how deep we can take this shamanic stuff because she's willing to go there with me. And we reached this point where like she was making decisions going against her intuition. And I was like, why? Why are you doing that? She said, I don't know. So I created a meditation for her that was about meeting the version of herself that said no and knowing what that feels like. So you have an inner child that's saying no. You're overriding it. That's like the baseline for overriding your intuition. You know the answer and you are bulldozing it and saying, nope, my logical mind knows better. Terrible idea. Anyway, I made this meditation to feel into what no feels like. So if your intuition says no, what does that feel like in your body? Who is that child who never got to say no? What are they trying to tell you now? It's a whole thing. So if you're working with a practitioner and you can determine exactly where you're tripping up, exactly where you're getting stuck, they can create personalized meditations for you to work with it. It's one of the things that I do for my clients. Super invaluable. And I'm going to have one of these meditations in my Insight Timer profile to help you work on this. So you can go check that out. I'll include the link in the podcast, but it's also on the website. Now, some other guided practices would be learning how to listen to the body's signals through guidance, learning how to connect with the spirit of the body, somatic awareness, just in general. What does this feel like? What does that feel like? And just taking a few moments to sit in the body. How does it feel when I think about eating pasta for dinner? What does my body want me to feel when it's a yes, when it's a hell yes, when I should turn towards this or not turn towards that? Like your body will always tell you. You just have to listen. Any small practice that includes routines, food, clothing, what do you feel like doing today? Asking your intuition, practicing. Some physical things that can be really helpful with tuning into the intuition is myofascial release therapy. Amazing. Some craniosacral therapists will also do this. It's one of my favorite practices. I have some recommendations locally if you need one, but most people don't live near me. Regular spiritual practices can be very helpful. Meditation, yoga, anything that helps put you back in your body so you can feel the subtleties of the connection and communication. Now, identifying some external influences of what's keeping you trapped with your intuition will be very helpful. Who are the people, environments, or even the cultural messages that keep reinforcing your self-doubt? Start paying attention. And it really helps in this process of learning to trust your intuition to hire somebody to help you, a coach, a therapist, a mentor, to help you see what you can't. That reflection piece, that witness piece is so important on the path. We can't always do it for ourselves. Healing is not just about the individual healing path. It requires community, period. So work on surrounding yourself with people who honor your truth because it's essential for rewriting your scripts about intuition, about your self-doubt. Affirming communities can also feel super uncomfortable at first. Friendships where people reflect your truth, very uncomfortable, but worth it, I promise. Now, the hard truth here is that much of the world may not believe you because you don't believe in yourself. And there is going to be some levels of grief for years of having your intuition silenced. And more than likely, if you're struggling with this intuition piece, it may change your relationships drastically with your parents, your siblings, your friends, your partners, because right now the world reflects how you currently feel about yourself, not your ideal version. And sometimes the people in your life will grow with you, and sometimes they don't. So it does take a lot of courage to go down this path of learning to trust your intuition, because it often means you're going to have to let a lot of things die so that you can become who you want to be. And that's the scariest part of the spiritual path, is all that death and destruction and release. It's also the most gratifying, if we're being honest. Now, the paradox here is that once you start honoring your intuition, your life does get clearer and lighter, even if it's not easy to get there. So every time you validate your own inner voice, you're healing both yourself, or not both, you're healing yourself, your bloodline, and the collective wound just a little. And all of that in the spiritual world gets reciprocating gifts in medicine. Any work that you do for yourself, for others, for the collective, not when you're doing it in like a martyr kind of way, but like a genuine healing yourself, there is a reciprocation piece where you get the healing back times 10. So with your intuition, the stronger it becomes, the louder it becomes, and it just starts with a little bit of practice. And then you become medicine for others when you embody it. So now on to the homework. I'm going to give you some journal prompts and guided practices to work on your intuition, as well as some shadow work exercises. So feel free to pause as you need. First of all, the journal prompts. Okay, so journaling is my favorite way to unpack things. Highly recommend it. When it comes to working on your intuition, it's awesome. So first journal prompt. When has my intuition spoken to me and I ignored it? And what happened afterward? I'm going to sidestep here and say journaling is really important. There is something very special on putting it on paper. So please do not just think the answers to these questions. Write them down. And if you don't want to write them down, ask yourself why. Yes, it's inconvenient. I don't care. It's important. Take some time to do it. Second question. What did no feel like in my body as a child? What did yes feel like? Number 3. Who in my life tends to honor my intuition and who dismisses it? How does that shape my self-trust? Number 4. If I believed myself fully, what would I change today? Now, there's a simple guided practice that I love, and you may get answers the first time. You may have to do it a few times. But you want to sit quietly with your hands on your heart and your belly and ask yourself a clear yes/no question. Something simple like, do I want tea right now? And notice the sensations. Does it feel expansive, warm, easy, energetic versus tight, contracted, heavy? What does yes feel like? What does no feel like? And practice this with small choices daily to rebuild your body's signals. It can take time, so be patient with the process. However, I find that once we start talking to the body, it continually starts to talk back. It's just been waiting for us to listen. And for this one, you can head over to the Insight Timer account linked on the website and follow the guided meditation I have posted on this topic. Next, we're going to talk about shadow work exercises. So you can journal these or practice them or both in real time. But next time your intuition arises and you override it, I want you to pause and ask the question, what story or fear just popped up that told me not to trust myself? Again, this is going to be really important to write down because writing will help things expand over and over and over again. It really brings the thought into a solid place so that it can be looked at appropriately. Thoughts are very slippery, they can slide back into the shadow quite easily and remain largely unseen. Whereas if you write it down, you can do like a whole mind mapping exercise or journal dump around it and really get to the bottom of it. So you can trace this back to, when was the first time I learned this story? Whose voice was it? And then if you want to go deeper into more parts work, you can thank the part of you that was protecting you with this story and invite them to try a new response with you now. Like, I no longer have to say no in order to protect myself. I can say yes, and ooh, this is how good it feels in my body. Can we work on doing that? Parts work is an excellent piece to the shadow work puzzle. I really love the book No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. It's also really good to do parts work with a coach because they can hold the container for all the parts to come forward. It's really awesome. And then I want you to do like a community check-in, identifying one person that you can share your intuition hits with who will reflect it back to you with belief and encouragement. Who can you tell about these hunches that you have, about these thoughts or urges or feelings that can reflect? Is there anybody who can? And notice how it feels different to have your inner knowing validated externally. So, having your relationship with intuition is not about perfection, it's about practice. And every time you treat your inner knowing as valid, you're going to chip away for yourself, your family, and your collective. Over time, it creates unshakable self-trust, I promise you. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to know more about me and my work, you can find me at www.sacredheartshaman.com.